I just got back from watching F1 the movie, and I have a lot to say about it. I'm going to give a spoiler-free review first for anyone who might be interested in going to see it, and then I will get into spoilers a bit later. So hang around if you've already seen the movie or you aren't planning on it. So, F1 the movie stars Brad Pitt as Sonny Hayes. He's a old grizzled F1 driver from the 90s who's been bouncing around various race categories, and he is brought into the Apex GP team by Ruben, played by Javier Bardem. And there he meets his hotshot rookie teammate Joshua Pierce, played by Damson Idris, and it follows the story of the team trying to win their first race. Overall, the story of the movie was very good. It's your classic underdog story about a ragtag team trying to all come together to be able to achieve their goal. So I think that aspect of the movie was well done. I think it was a good story and it was quite simple in that way, so it was easy to get behind and easy to follow. Coming into it knowing it's directed by Joseph Kosinski, who directed Top Gun Maverick, you can kind of expect the same kind of cinematography, with a lot of the cameras being very technically set up on these F1 cars that they've put together. And so all of that part was very well done. The music was also quite well done. It's scored by Hans Zimmer, who is probably one of my favorite composers. His usual style, but kind of with a little bit more of like a techie undertone, it felt like. And so I think that really suited the movie well. I think overall the acting is quite good. I think there are a few moments that kind of pulled me out of the movie. I think Brad Pitt has a few scenes where I think the believability of it wasn't quite there for me. But I think Damson Idris was really good. Carrie Condon, I think, gave the best performance in this movie. And Sarah Niles, who plays Joshua Pierce's mom, I think she also did quite well in her role. So that's kind of the good. Now getting to the bad. I think what this movie comes down to for me is it is kind of in the same vein as Drive to Survive. I think if you like Drive to Survive and you like it gives you a behind the scenes look at F1, but plays with reality in a way that isn't quite factual, I think you will be okay because you're able to suspend your disbelief to be able to enjoy that show. But if that is an issue that you have with DTS and the fact that you don't like how they play with real life events and you want it to be factual and accurate, then I don't think this movie is for you. And personally, for me, as someone who does like DTS quite a bit, I do reaction videos to it every year on this channel, and this movie was a tough watch for me. If I'm being completely honest, I think it was more difficult than Drive to Survive for me to really watch it without being kind of brought out of the movie by certain things that happened. And I think I'll get into more specifics in my spoiler review, but that is kind of the general sense of how I feel about this movie. I think it was an enjoyable watch, but parts of it just took me completely out. I think this is one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had watching a movie. Yeah, so it wasn't bad. It wasn't, I don't, it's very difficult to say. I think how I'm going to phrase it is this. If you are not an F1 fan or don't have a lot of knowledge about the history of Formula One, I think you can sit down, watch this movie, get engrossed in it, like the storyline, and really enjoy the movie. But if you are a hardcore F1 fan, I don't think you will enjoy it. And it's kind of disappointing to say that. So I guess that is kind of my, that's my spoiler-free review, is that if you were coming to my channel to get an F1 fan's opinion on the movie and you don't know much about the sport, go for it. I think you'll really enjoy it. I think it does a really good job of introducing you to the world of F1 and getting you into a little bit of the strategy of it, a little bit of the drama of it, and a little bit of like the kind of politicking and business with CEOs and contracts and all of that kind of stuff. And I think that is a part of the movie that really excels. But if you are a real F1 fan, then any moment in the movie that has to do with the racing is really going to pull you out of it. So that's kind of how I feel about it. That is my spoiler-free review. So stick around if you want to know about specific moments in this movie that made me feel this way. All right, so now for spoilers. I'm going to get into the good parts of the movie first. Number one thing that I mentioned in my spoiler-free review was the cinematography. I think they did a really good job of kind of capturing what it would really feel like to drive in an F1 car. And I think the big thing was the quality of the onboard images was really, really good, and to a level that they haven't quite been able to achieve in a real F1 race. I think without the like kind of having that camera need to be live footage and without it kind of being super shaky, I think it delivered a really clear visual, and I think that was really, really well done. I think another thing that I really enjoyed about this movie was everything that happened in the storyline outside of what happened on track. So anytime they had making camaraderie between the mechanics and kind of there was this one mechanic, she was responsible for changing the tires, and in the first race she made a mistake and caused a long pit stop, and she was feeling really down about it. And so it was kind of this moment of showing Joshua Pierce kind of coming down hard on her about it versus Sunny Hayes with a little bit more experience and empathy kind of came at her with like, it's okay, like just like learn from it and that kind of thing. And then kind of how that kind of ingratiated Sunny in with the team and like getting acquainted with the mechanics and that kind of thing. That was really well done. They also had a lot of like strategy meetings, and so kind of the banter and that and like discussing what kind of strategy to do. I think that felt very true to life, and they did a really good job with that. And then I think they also had a lot of stuff with Javier Bardem's character and also this one character on the board and kind of the politicking between them and Sunny and kind of how that played out in the movie, I think was also very well done. So I think that was all good. And then kind of we had a few moments between Joshua Pierce's character and his mom, and those were really heartfelt and very well done. And then most of Sunny's moments outside the track, kind of learning his backstory and how he was preparing for the race weekends. I think that kind of showed a lot of kind of what drivers go through on a weekend to weekend basis and kind of what they're doing when they're not at the track as well. So I think all of that was really well done. And I think that was the part of the movie where I was actually able to like really settle in and like kind of absorb it as a movie. I think overall Joshua Pierce's character arc was really well done, to give kind of a TLDR of it. Essentially, he's this hotshot rookie who's come in and he's like, I mean, he's been on a team that hasn't been doing very well. And so he's kind of worried about losing his seat. But he also is kind of letting kind of the off track attention and the sponsorship stuff and the women kind of all interfere with him being able to focus on track. And he's also got a bit of an ego to him. And so he doesn't really want to listen to the team or kind of take accountability for certain things that happens. And so his character arc is him kind of learning that he's part of a team and that to be successful in F1, you can't be me all the time. You also have to do things for the team. And so I think it's a very common kind of arc that a lot of young F1 drivers, I think, go through. And so I think that was really realistic and really well done. And then a big part of that is one moment that I will get into later. And then there were a few good moments that involved real life people. The first was Roscoe, Lewis Hamilton's dog, made a little appearance, and everyone in the theater was just like, oh, I was like, Roscoe! So that was really cute. And I think the thing I enjoyed the most about like kind of how they were weaving the Apex racing storyline into the F1 race storyline was anytime there was a moment of chaos that needed to happen, they always had Kevin Magnussen be the driver to cause it. So whenever they had like a collision with another driver, it was usually K-Mag. And I laughed every time because it's so true. Ugh. And so I think that was kind of the one thing that they did with that made a lot of sense because of course K-Mag is the driver that you don't want to get into a battle with because he will cause damage to your car. So that was really funny and really well done. And I don't think he actually made an on-screen appearance, but I think he had the most impact of any of the drivers because of those racing moments. And then the other really good part was literally every single time there was a team principal on screen. There were kind of 4 moments. The first was with Gunter Steiner. I think this was in the trailers where he was like leaning out from his pit box and mouthed an FU to the Apex GP team. Very funny. And then there was a press conference that they had between Zach Brown and Fred Vasseur and then the Apex GP team principal. And that was also quite funny. Fred dropped a really good line there. And then the final moment was at the end of the movie after the kind of ending scene, and Toto goes up to Joshua Pierce and says, hey, like, if you're ever interested, Mercedes can be a place for you, kind of thing. And so that was kind of nice too. So I think that was kind of good that the TPs kind of got involved in the acting a little bit. So that was kind of fun. And I felt like it fit more into the storyline a little bit more. And so it didn't really pull me out of the movie as much. So those were the things that were good about the movie. Now we got to talk about what was bad. And there were a few like minor things that I took issue with. I think one of the first one was something that we kind of had heard coming into the movie, and it was that Simone Ashley, who plays Kate in the Bridgerton series, she was supposed to be Joshua Pierce's love interest in the story, and they essentially completely cut her out of the movie. Apparently she had only a few seconds of screen time, and I didn't even pick up on it. And so that was really disappointing to hear about. And it is the second time that Joseph Kosinski has actually cut an actor of color out of his movie. It happened to Manny Jacinto in Top Gun Maverick as well. And so that was really disappointing to hear. And like, I love her as an actress. She's like, Bridgerton season 2 is like my favorite season of that show, and she's just so good in it. And so it was really disappointing that this was kind of going to be her breakout role into like a big movie, and she was just completely cut out of it. However, I think I'm less upset about it now having seen the movie, because I do think that having her in might have muddled Joshua Pierce's character arc. And so I think they probably took Simone Ashley out of it to kind of streamline that and make it a little bit more clear. And so I understand why they did it, but it's still kind of upsetting that that was the romantic storyline that they cut out when there is another one that was not. The other kind of minor bad thing that I didn't really enjoy about the movie was Crofty and Martin Brundle's commentary. So anyone who watches DTS, you know they have this commentary guy. I feel like it might be Harry Benjamin, but I'm not 100% sure on that, who will kind of come in and give this fake commentary for the show. And for the movie, they kind of did a similar thing with Crofty and Martin Brundle. And for me, I think it just felt really fake. I think they just gave the lines in a way that didn't sound like they were doing commentary. It felt very kind of added on and like they were just commenting on what was happening on screen instead of kind of making it more like how they would in a commentary box, which like I can kind of understand why they're like trying to give some sort of exposition and explanation on kind of the strategy or tire related things that were happening in the race. But one, it kind of took me out of the movie, and two, it just felt weird. Like it didn't feel natural, I think. Even if I hadn't known it was Crofty and Brundle, like it just felt weird. And so I didn't really enjoy that. And anytime they were talking, it just felt off. And so it kind of pulled me out. But there are two main things that really bothered me about this movie. The first one is Carrie Condon's character. Her name was Kate McKenna. And the fact that they had her in a romantic role with Sunny Hayes. And this just felt so unnecessary. I don't understand why they felt the need to force this in. It didn't really support anything with Sunny Hayes. I guess maybe the only reason why they decided to do this is because at the end of the movie, Sunny really like kind of in a, not really a monologue, but in a longer scene kind of talks to her about why he's racing and kind of his story with things. And so I guess they thought that if she wasn't the romantic interest, he wouldn't have opened up to her in that way or something. And so it felt like the romance was kind of a plot device to get to that scene. And I think it really, really bothered me for two reasons. One, she was the technical lead of the Apex team. And I don't think that any woman would jeopardize that role to sleep with the driver. And there were other female, like, members of the team in the film. Like I mentioned, there was that one mechanic who was on the wheel gun. And then there was also a female engineer who worked on the simulator that kind of had a few lines in there. But it just felt so unnecessary. And I think it also really undermined her character because kind of the reason that she went into as to why she wanted to get into F1 and why she wanted to win a race was to kind of prove everyone wrong. And she was doing it to prove that women could do it too. And it just feels like since she was in this relationship with Sunny, it was like kind of undermining that message in a way that kind of a lot of, I'll say, male fans out there sometimes talk to women and that, oh, you're only in it for the driver, or oh, you're sleeping your way to the top, or things like that. And so it just really undermined that message for me. And also, like, when they finally achieved their big goal at the end of the movie and everyone's so excited and celebrating, the only thing she's worried about is where Sunny is. And it's just like, she wasn't happy in that moment celebrating her own achievement. It was like, oh, I'm going to be worried about the man. Like, it was just really disappointing for me because I think they did a really good job with the other female, like, members of the team in this movie. And the fact that they did that to this character was really upsetting. And also, I don't think this movie passed the Bechdel test. I don't think she ever had a conversation with the other two female members of the team, didn't have a conversation with Joshua Pierce's mom. And so it's a little thing that, like, if a movie doesn't pass the Bechdel test, it's just like, ugh, come on, do better, guys. Like, seriously. So that was kind of one of the things that really bothered me. But my biggest complaint with this movie is all of the racing scenes. And the stories of how they had the races play out. So basically, what they did in this movie is they had real life races that actually happened, and they would, using CGI, have the Apex GP cars kind of move in a way that would go through what actually happened in the race. So, kind of a couple examples I have is like at Hungary in 2023, if you guys remember, the Alpines collided and I think Gasly got flung into the air. And so that happened in front of the cars. And so they kind of showed that off to the side as the Apex GP cars kind of went down the inside. And so that's kind of how they played that part out, which I think was okay. Like, I was okay with that. I think it makes sense for, like, they were at the actual races and they kind of used real life footage and then kind of incorporated the Apex team into that. And so I was more okay with that kind of stuff happening. It was kind of like a, I remember that happening kind of thing, but it wasn't too bothersome. But the things that bothered me was that in some of the races, they would take moments that have happened in real life and use them as plot points in the movie. So the first instance of this happening was kind of getting into Sonny Hayes' backstory. So basically what they did with Sonny Hayes' story is that they said that he had suffered a major crash in the late 80s, early 90s that basically he had like spinal injuries and broke a ton of bones in his body. And what they did was, I had to look this up after the race, but I recognized the footage as soon as they played it. I was like, oh, that is a real thing that actually happened. It was Martin Donnelly's crash at the Spanish Grand Prix in 1990. And you just know it from the image. It's when his Lotus crashes, and then you show him kind of strewn on the racetrack like just a mangled body. And he survived the crash and went on to race later, but they used that as inspiration for Sonny Hayes' his like character and his story. But to me, it felt like they actually used the footage and of like that crash and said that was Sonny Hayes' story. And I really didn't like that. I think it was taking a real life near death incident and like making it Hollywood. And like I feel like you can take inspiration from moments like that, but the fact that they used the actual footage, that just felt very off base to me. And I understand that they had given Martin Donnelly credit in the movie, and so I'm sure they approached him, was like, hey, this is what we're gonna do, or would you be okay with this? And he probably must have okayed it for them to do this. But it just felt like they were making a real life moment a Hollywood moment, and I really didn't like that. And then there was another moment where they kind of did this too, where they're at Monza and it's wet, and Joshua Pierce's character is on slicks and he's battling with Max Verstappen for the win of the race. It was going to be their first win, and Sonny Hayes had done this like crazy strategy to get Joshua Pierce to this position. And Joshua Pierce tries to go around the outside of Parabolica in the wet and ends up sliding, hitting a sausage curb, and then flying over the barrier and bursting into flame. And so obviously the first thing that your mind goes to is Romain Grosjean's crash from Bahrain in 2020. And so kind of a similar thing happens where Sonny gets out of the car and runs over and gets Joshua Pierce out of the car, and then Joshua Pierce is left with burned hands that takes him a few races to recover from. And so it was kind of a similar thing where they took this real life moment that actually happened in a race that was terrifying, and they made it into a Hollywood moment. This one I was a little bit more okay with because I think it was a little bit more of an homage to it. It wasn't like he crashed through the barriers, he like crashed over. It was a different track. Like, It was kind of all those kinds of things. And so this one was just kind of like I see what you did there kind of thing. But the third thing that they did is the last race of the movie is at Abu Dhabi. And they're going for the win. And they pulled off another crazy strategy. They're like sitting in third and fourth, kind of going into the last little bit of the race. And what ends up happening is Sunny Hayes crashes in a very, very similar spot to Nicholas Latifi. And his rear wing is kind of destroyed a little bit. So then they're like, okay, there's a little bit of debris on the track, and Sunny Hayes is able to drive his car back to the pits to be fixed so that they can fix his rear wing. But what they do is they call a red flag with 3 laps to go in the race. And so what they basically did in the movie is they took what happened at Abu Dhabi 2021 and did the thing that they should have done of calling a red flag, and then using that to then say, okay, Sunny Hayes and Joshua Pierce were able to put on fresh, new, soft tires because they had qualified poorly and so had an extra set, versus Lewis and Charles had on old sets of softs. And so that was how they were able to then go on to, spoiler alert, win the race with Sunny winning after Joshua Pierce collides with Lewis Hamilton, which was also a bit unbelievable because Sunny also had a spin. And so it was like, I don't know. It didn't feel super realistic. But that whole thing, I was like, really? This is really how they're gonna win the race? Like, yeah. So that bugged me. Or I think it was good in a way that it was a good way to do that, but it was just like taking a complete shot at that race. And for that reason, just completely pulled me right out of the movie. And I was like, this is ridiculous. So those were kind of the 3 moments that really bugged me from all of that stuff. Apart from that, there were a few moments that had me laughing out loud in the theater when no one else in the theater did. Because I think it's just me and my cringy feelings about drivers sometimes, and just things happening that I picked up on that literally no one else picked up on. The first thing was like literally anytime the Apex drivers passed Max, Lewis, or Charles, or even like Carlos, I was like, no way in hell that would happen in real life. Like, it was just a bit silly. And it was kind of moments like that that made me understand like why I think a lot of the drivers didn't really like the movie, is that I think they all were pretty well passed on track in the movie. And so it's like, why would I enjoy this? Like, they're like making this fake scenario to make these 2 nobodies seem like they're better drivers than us. So I can kind of understand all of that. And then another thing that kind of had me laughing is a lot of times in the movies, how they would try and get Apex to get points or win was pulling out these like crazy strategies. So the first race that they kind of did this in was Hungary, where Sunny Hayes just kept hitting over and over and over for new softs. And then every time was just like going out, being a bit of a terror on track, damaging his front wing to cause like safety cars or debris so they could pull Joshua Pierce into the pits to get him a cheap pit stop. And like Sunny Hayes was like talking about this on the radio, and you're just like, there's no way in hell that like the FIA wouldn't pick up on the fact that he's doing this on purpose. And so they would have totally like DSQ'd both cars. And so this was how this was how Joshua Pierce ended up getting his first points, was because of all the shenanigans that Sunny Hayes was doing. And I was just like, this is just not how this would happen. The other thing that happened was at Monza, a big reason why they were able to get Joshua Pierce into a battle with Max Verstappen for the lead was that Sunny Hayes did the thing where he stayed out really long on hards to kind of back people up behind him, which would have been fine at a lot of tracks, except for this was at Monza, which is like one of the heaviest DRS tracks on the calendar, and you're telling me that no one could get past Sunny Hayes on an old set of hards? Like, it wasn't quite realistic in that way. A part of that too was like Joshua Pierce, like Sunny Hayes was going on the radio and telling them to tell him to like try and overtake Max for the win going into turn 1 at Monza, which is of course what everyone does at Monza and is the only good overtaking spot on Monza. But Joshua Pierce decides, no, I'm going to be this egomaniac about this and make a ridiculous decision to try and overtake Max Verstappen around the outside of Parabolica in the rain on slick tires. And you're like, there's only one way this is going to go, dude. Like, I don't think any racing driver in their right mind would make that kind of call. And so, of course, he's going to crash. Like, what do you mean you're going to make that kind of move? And so that one was just kind of stupid too. Yeah, I think those were kind of my two main complaints with the strategy. Like, they were using Plan C a lot for Plan Chaos to kind of talk about this, and like, I don't know, anytime it happened, it was just like, the FIA is gonna pick up on the fact that this is what's happening, like they're gonna black flag him. Like, it was kind of dumb in that way. So yeah, so that kind of was, a lot of those moments were pretty laugh out loud. Like, it kind of took me out of the movie a little bit as well, but I think that was more so just me kind of knowing how strategy works. And so if you're not into the strategy as much, like, I don't think it would bug you as much. And then a couple other little things was the fact that in their engineering meetings, they were using Apple computers, which, like, I guess it makes sense because it was a movie that was distributed by Apple. But anyone who has been an engineer will know that Apple computers are not the best for any kind of engineering software. And so it was kind of ridiculous to see everyone on Apple computers at all times in the movie. You're like, none of this software, like, you're not going to get computational design working on an Apple computer. Like, it's just not really built for that kind of stuff. So that was just one of my own personal gripes. And then another thing was the first time that Will Buxton showed up on the screen, I was like, of course he's fucking in this movie. Yeah, and then a lot of the moments with the drivers, specifically like when they actually kind of had them doing things for the movie. So at the end they had Sunny Hayes celebrating on the podium with Charles and George, which of course we all kind of saw photos of that happening when it happened. So it wasn't shocking that that was what ended up happening at the end of the movie, but it was still pretty funny to see them on there like showering Brad Pitt with champagne. So yeah, so that was kind of funny too. Overall, that's kind of what happened in the movie, and for that reason, it just felt like every time there was an off-track moment with kind of more acting, I really felt like it was a good movie and I was really getting into it. I enjoyed the story. I liked the character moments. It was really funny. There was a lot of really good banter that they had going, and so I would kind of get pulled into the movie. And then every single time there was a race happening, I would just get completely pulled out because I was too busy paying attention to like, oh, that's the thing that happened at that race. That's this moment from an actual different F1 race that happened that they're using as plot. Oh, they're overtaking Valtteri. Oh, K-Mag, they're battling with him. Oh, he's battling with Max for the win and Max is the one pushing them off. Which, like, I think is probably why Max has not been involved in any of the activities related to the movie, is that they once again kind of made him into the villain, and I think he's done with anything that will put him into that narrative. So yeah, I think that completely solved that mystery as to why Max just like had no interest in this movie at all. I think overall, I would say if you like DTS or are not an F1 fan at all, and this movie is going to be your first introduction to it, go ahead, watch it. I think you'll enjoy it. If you don't like DTS or you find that the parts of DTS that are about true moments and things being played out factually and them not really sensationalizing moments in races, then I don't think this movie is going to be for you. I think the biggest selling point for those fans might be kind of some of the behind the scenes stuff that they have with the teams. And there are a few like moments with the team principals, as I mentioned. But honestly, like the cinematography of the movie is good, but it's not that far off to what they're doing in F1 now. And I do think that a lot of the technology that they used in this movie is starting to be used on the cars themselves. And so I really don't think you're missing out on much if you think that, oh, it'll be really good to see for the racing action. It wasn't to the level that really blew me out of the water. But it was like very clear picture and it really gave you a good sense of like being in the car with the driver. But yeah, I think for that thing alone, I don't think it should be worth your time if that is the only thing that you thought about maybe going to see this movie for. So yeah, that is my spoiler free and spoiler review of the F1 movie. The only good thing I got out of it was this poster. So, yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. If you went and saw the movie, let me know what you thought about it. Did the racing moments bother you as much as they bothered me? And yeah, like and comment down below. And I will see you all in the next one for another race reaction video. Doodles.